Gameplay for Bungie's new extraction shooter Marathon has finally been revealed, and I can't help but feel a little bit disappointed and worried about how this game's going to turn out. Now, to be super transparent up front, I have not played Marathon. I wasn't invited to the event. I hadn't seen any gameplay footage before today at all. I saw the same reveal footage everybody else did. I am a Marathon creator. I'm a part of that program, so they sent me a bunch of stuff, and I've got guaranteed access to the alpha, so I'll be able to play the game for myself in a couple of weeks. But after watching the gameplay reveal, I really came away feeling like it wasn't the game that I was hoping it was going to be. So that's what I want to talk about today. So first of all, what is Marathon? It's an extraction shooter, and it's very much like a lot of other extraction shooters. You go in teams of 3, or they've said they'll be very kind and allow you to queue up as a duo or solo if you want to, and then you land in a big open map, and I'm guessing you'll have missions to do from factions, and you go around, you try and gather decent loot, you choose what weapons and loadout and stuff to take in out of your loot, and then obviously you're trying to gather more loot and complete missions and stuff like that, and then extract before the timer runs out, and then you'll be able to keep all of the loot that you had. Of course, there's going to be other players fighting you, so it looks like there'll be 6 teams on the map that we're going to play in the alpha. They said different numbers of teams depending on the map, I guess, like what DMZ did. And there'll be 18 players on the map that we're going to be playing in the alpha, and any of those players could come and kill you and then take all of your stuff. And if you get killed, yes, you can be looted and all of that stuff, and you can be revived by your teammates, but if you've lost your stuff, it's gone. So far, so much like pretty much every other extraction shooter, and that's the thing that really disappointed me about this. Because it's Bungie, and Bungie are known for doing things differently. Like, it's easy to forget that Halo was a very different game when it came out on consoles. You know, it was the first really huge first-person shooter on console. I know there'd been GoldenEye and Perfect Dark before, and you'd been able to play things like Quake and Doom and all stuff like that. But really, Halo was the one that kicked it off and made the idea of a console first-person shooter something different to what you were able to experience on PC. And then Destiny kind of changed what an MMO could be and really kind of reinvented that first-person RPG, team-based PvE type experience. It was something that hadn't really been done before. And I was kind of expecting, maybe unrealistically, Marathon to be the same. I know obviously Marathon is based on some really old first-person shooter games that they made, but to be honest, after now seeing the reveal, it's not really anything like them at all, so I'm not going to talk about them. But Marathon is an extraction shooter, and it seems like rather than trying to really go in their own direction with the core gameplay loop of what an extraction shooter is, they've instead decided just to fall in with that genre and then put that sort of Bungie magic, that Bungie twist in terms of the combat and in terms of the environment and the storytelling and the visual style. Now, I don't want to be overly negative with everything. I do think the visual style is really interesting. It doesn't look like any other game, and I think that's quite a hard thing to achieve nowadays, to have something where it's just very difficult to compare it to anything else. I do think the long cinematic thing they put at the end of it, they played like a 10-minute cinematic at the end of the presentation. That looked a lot cooler than what the gameplay looked like. And obviously cinematics can be, higher resolution and more detailed and stuff. But even the art style in the cinematic, it was a lot grittier and dustier, and it kind of felt a lot more grounded. Whereas the gameplay that we saw was so arcadey in terms of visuals, to the point where it looked like people sometimes sort of disappeared into pixels, and there were lots of kind of big like arcade icons and visuals floating around on a map. I don't know, it didn't look very cohesive to me. It looked a little bit strange. And while the menus and everything and the UI that they've shown off I think looks really good, the actual like backpack UI actually doesn't. I don't think that looks that good. But the in-game graphics that we saw, I don't know, I just thought they looked a little bit too arcadey and a little bit too abstract maybe, and not grounded in the way that cinematic was. In terms of the combat, I think it's kind of hard to tell from a video like this. Like, we did get to see some gameplay, we got to see people like Dr. Lupo and stuff playing, and I think now a bunch of people who were invited to the event have been able to share their own gameplay, so there's lots more out there. Some things I noticed were that the guns all looked really interesting. Like, you've seen tons of different guns, and it's nice to have an extraction shooter that's not just using like AK-47s and M4s and stuff like that. I've had enough of that. Looking forward to having some weird Bungie guns. And I thought it was very cool when they were talking about how you can loot different sort of mods to your armor or to your shell. So they mentioned something like, oh, one of them will let you triple jump instead of double jumping. Like, that's a pretty huge change, and being able to have that as loot, I think that's kind of cool. But on the negative side, the time to kill looked insanely fast. Like, it showed players headshotting people, getting one-shot kills with the sniper rifle. It showed, even in the close combat, people dying really quickly in a way that's not super characteristic of Halo and Destiny. Like, I know both of those games have had one-shot sniper rifles and things like that, but then when you've got close to people and you've been getting into fighting, because you have shields and things like that, generally the fights are a bit more drawn out and a bit more thoughtful, and there's time to use your abilities and stuff like that and to counterplay people. In this, it looked very much like if you get the drop on someone, you can just absolutely destroy them, which to me would sound a bit worrying, because it's like, okay, when are you going to be using all of your abilities and things like that if as soon as you start getting shot, you're just dead immediately? But like I said, I haven't played it. Maybe when you're in the game, you can get sort of shields and things like that, and it's not always going to be as quick as it looked in this gameplay footage. In terms of the looting, I thought that looked a bit crap, to be honest. Like, they were just running around grabbing random objects and then looking in their inventory to see kind of the value of them or what they were. That's something that's been in a lot of extraction games, and I've always hated it, because what ends up happening is, after you've played it for a while, your gameplay loop becomes landing on a planet or whatever, the map that you're going into, and then just running a loop and hoovering up as much loot as you possibly can and hoping that you get lucky. It's like playing a slot machine and just hoping that you manage to grab something that's super valuable. It didn't really look like they were sort of breaking into facilities and sort of trying to get to a specific place to get a specific item. It looked very much like they were just opening random boxes and hoping that they got something good, which again, I just don't really like that style of gameplay at all. I'd much prefer stuff to be a bit more intentional, like, hey, you need this particular object, okay, well, you're going to have to go in and break into this secret room, and to do that you're going to have to open up this vault and disable this security and stuff like that. That would be really cool. The idea that, oh, you can just get some really cool loot because you got lucky opening a box in some random shack, to me that's not particularly interesting. The movement in the game did look really interesting. That looked like something that does make it stand out a little bit from other extraction shooters. It looked like there were a lot of movement options. You could dash in the air. Obviously, like I mentioned before, you could have double jumps, you could have triple jumps. It showed people sliding into vents and things like that. So I'm sure there will be some cool movement in it. And, Destiny's done a really good job of that. There's loads of different ways to move around in Destiny, and I think that's been really interesting. And that does make fights a bit more interesting. So that's definitely one positive, is that the movement makes it look like, okay, this will be something that is very different from what we've seen so far in the extraction shooter space. And then one of the aspects that we saw that I thought was really disappointing was the AI. Like, one thing before the reveal stream, while I was kind of chatting to the people watching my stream, one of the things we were talking about was how Bungie are famous for a couple of things. They're famous for world building and creating beautiful environments, which I don't think we really saw in this. They're known for doing combat really well and doing combat in really interesting ways, which I think they might have done in this, except for the whole fast time to kill thing. But then they're also known for making really interesting PvE encounters. Like from that first level in Halo, when you realise the difference between fighting elites and fighting grunts, and how if you took out an elite, all the grunts would panic and some of them would just light up grenades and run towards you. And while you were fighting the elites, you had to work out how to break their shield and then use different weapons to take them down. And you'd panic if you suddenly saw an energy sword lighting up because you knew that meant they could kill you in one hit. That kind of layered, interesting PvE gameplay was what made Halo stand out. And then in Destiny, obviously the raids are incredibly famous for being super interesting, super in-depth, like having to try and work out how you can even damage these bosses, how you can survive different encounters, having teams work together to try and achieve things is super cool. In Marathon, it didn't look like there was any of that, really. It looked like a lot of the enemies would just walk out into the open and let you shoot them, like in a lot of other extraction shooters, like in DMZ, where I always thought the AI was really disappointing in that. And then they did talk a little bit about there being some stronger UESC sort of soldiers, some commanders that would have special abilities and stuff like that. And a couple of them did look like they could kill some of the players, so that's kind of cool that they're a real threat. But they didn't look like they were doing anything super interesting. It definitely didn't look like anything on the sort of level that we've seen in Halo or Destiny before. And when they were talking in the interview section and they were saying about what are the threats on the world, they said, oh yeah, so there's the soldiers, and then there's ticks, which are little alien things that will run towards you and explode. And then there's environmental hazards like fire and radiation and stuff. And that was it. And I was really surprised by that. I thought they were going to be like, oh yeah, there's like secret bosses somewhere, or there's like this mysterious type of creature that will be stalking you. It didn't sound like PvE is really a focus of this at all. It sounds like the PvE element, the soldiers wandering around, or these ticks, are just like a little thing to get in the way, a little obstacle to get in the way, whereas the real focus of the game is on PvP. And this brings us to the main reason I'm disappointed in the Marathon reveal. I've been saying for years now, it feels like, that the biggest problem with extraction shooters is other players. That nearly all extraction shooters work on a basis of you spend more time in a game, you will get better at the game, of course, like any game, but also because of the progression, you'll start amassing better loot, better gear, and your player will get stronger. And that's a problem because whenever you're playing an extraction game, there's always going to be some people who put in more time than you. There's always going to be some people who will basically play it, 20 hours a day, and they will very quickly amass the absolute best loot. In Delta Force, that meant they would have the best ammo, they'd have the best armor, the best weapons. In Tarkov, similar thing. They would have armor that you couldn't even penetrate with normal weapons and things like that. They would be able to absolutely destroy you. And that meant that as a new player, or as a player that maybe wasn't as good, maybe you died a couple of times and you were trying to regain, if you had the bad luck of just getting matched up against these players, you wouldn't stand a chance. You'd get absolutely steamrolled. And that meant that you were less likely to want to sort of keep on going. You were less likely to want to keep on playing, because what's the point if you're just going in the game and then out of nowhere someone can just destroy you and steal all of your loot? So that meant that increasingly the player population shifted towards just being those sorts of players who put lots of time into it. Only the most hardcore players were still about, and that meant if you were a normal person playing the game, you were way more likely to get matched up against them, and that would kind of make your experience miserable. And this is something that happened on pretty much every extraction shooter. It happens in Tarkov, it happens in Delta Force, it happened in Grey Zone. It was just something, even in DMZ, lots of people would complain about the fact that the people who rushed through and completed all the missions really quickly, all they would have left to do was PvP. So they would just launch into games and immediately you put up a UAV, they'd already have level 3 plate armor, and they would come and chase you and shoot you just because that was the only thing left for them to do. And that has always happened. And I don't think it's any surprise that the one extraction game that's kind of worked, the one extraction game that's held an audience, is Escape from Tarkov. And one thing that almost defines Tarkov is the fact that they wipe the game fairly regularly. And if you pay attention to the numbers on Twitch, that's when people are interested in the game. When everybody is made equal again, you don't have some people with a massive advantage anymore. Everyone has a chance to kind of fight against other people. You're not going to be taken out by people with way better gear than you. That's when the game is at its most popular. And I think this is just a problem that's baked into the extraction shooter genre. That if you want to reward players by making them stronger, giving them better loot, and you also want to have this loot fear, gear fear mentality where you can lose everything when you go into a game, what's naturally going to happen is that the better players and the people who spend more time are going to steal gear from the lower ability players and sort of constantly just kick them when they're down. And so it kind of surprised me that Bungie, a company that are very well known for doing excellent PvE content, and, while Halo was great for PvP, Destiny hasn't had the best reputation for PvP. It's kind of interesting that with Marathon, they've decided to focus seemingly almost entirely on PvP. And this idea of, yes, you can get better armor. Yes, you can get better abilities. You can get better guns. If you play this game and you're lucky or you play a lot, you're going to become more powerful, and that's going to let you fight other players. So I expect Marathon to have the exact same problem that all of the other extraction shooters did. That it won't be that much fun for new players, it won't be that much fun for casual players or people who aren't so good at the game. They'll get wrecked by everybody else, and with the super fast time to kill, maybe you'll be able to turn the tables on people. Like, it's possible. They did say in the sort of presentation, oh, well, you know, everyone's going to have a chance regardless of your gear, but we'll see how true that is again with different armor and stuff like that. We'll see whether that really plays out. But if those new players or the players who aren't so good don't have any fun because they're just constantly getting destroyed by people who are no life in the game and absolutely amazing at it, then the average player skill is going to get higher and higher. It's going to get more and more difficult for new players, and that's going to mean the player base shrinks and you end up with just that really hardcore group left. And like I said, this isn't just me randomly theorizing. This has happened to every single extraction shooter that I've played, and I love playing extraction shooters when they first come out. They're always a lot of fun when everyone's equal, but it normally only takes a week or two before it becomes an absolute nightmare. So after that reveal, I'm disappointed. I'm worried about Marathon. It looks to be a kind of slightly more ordinary extraction shooter than I thought, and I'm expecting it to have the same problems that other extraction shooters did. And I'm disappointed that that's a thing, because I was really hoping that Bungie were going to do something really interesting with their talent for building incredible PvE encounters and really interesting worlds. I was hoping that we were going to see that in Marathon, and we haven't yet. Now, bear in mind, this is an early gameplay reveal before an alpha. Maybe I'm not really seeing the full picture. I'm not really seeing how the whole thing works together. Maybe because it's Bungie and, you know, they'll have much better marketing and they're more, you know, known name, maybe there'll be way more players playing this, and that means things like skill-based matchmaking or gear-based matchmaking will be really good, so you won't get matched up against those incredible players. But then it becomes a problem of, well, if you're always just matched against players who are as good as you or have the same gear as you, what's the point of wearing the best gear? Because then you'll just come up against other good players. It'd be better to just go in with cheap gear and then kill players who aren't as good as you. It's a really difficult problem for them to solve when they've built the game around PvP. So hopefully they've thought of this. Hopefully they've got some kind of solution to this. When they release the alpha, I'm not allowed to stream it or make videos, but I am allowed to talk about it, so I'll probably do another video after I've played a bit of this game, just letting you know whether my thoughts have changed on this at all. But yeah, I'm a little bit concerned. Let me know what you think of the gameplay reveal in the comments. I'll be super interested to hear what other people have to say. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out my streams every weekday morning. I'll be streaming some Warzone on both YouTube and Twitch, so I'll see you there. Goodbye.